No deal. Talks break down after lawmakers fail to reach an agreement on an economic rescue package for millions of Americans as the coronavirus pandemic continues to surge across the United States. And Chinese media apps under attack. TikTok and WeChat now banned in the United States. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu and this is The Heat. After marathon negotiations, Democrats and Republicans failed to reach an agreement providing an economic lifeline to the American people, already reeling from a devastating health crisis. President Trump has threatened to intervene, and he's expected to brief reporters in New Jersey about possible executive action. Meanwhile, in the latest salvo against China, the administration banned 2 media apps deemed a threat to national security. The White House also slapped sanctions on Hong Kong's chief executive, Carrie and 10 other Chinese officials for engaging in, quote, policies of suppression. For all the latest, let's go now to CGTN's Nathan King. He's live at the White House for us. Nathan, President Trump's speaking now. What can you tell us? What's expected?
Well, he's in Bedminster, New Jersey at his resort there, but he's called a last-minute news conference. What we understand is he will talk about some sort of executive action over the stall, talks about a 4th big stimulus bill to tackle COVID-19. Essentially, remember, just a few months ago, the Democrats passed a $3 trillion support bill in the House of Representatives. That was not taken up in the Senate. The Senate passed a $1 trillion. Really at stake is the $600 a week extra that American unemployed people have been getting from the federal government. That lapsed a couple of weeks ago. There's also stuff about supporting states so that they can keep policemen, firemen, nurses, etc., teachers on board. And they're still very, very far apart. Now, what the US president may do, we're told, is announce some sort of executive order. He likes those. What is unclear is how he can appropriate money. That's Congress's job. I am told that he might try and lift some sort of tax burden and try and leave it up to the states to give money to people who are unemployed still. He may talk about some sort of moratorium on evictions, helping other people. But really, this is a sort of feint, if you like, by this White House because the talks have stalled in Congress. It's Congress that really needs to decide. So it's going to be very interesting. Let's listen to Nancy Pelosi, of course, who is the Speaker of the House, the leading Democrat in Congress.
This virus is like a freight train coming so fast, and they're responding like a convoy going as slow as the slowest ship. It just now doesn't work. And what we put in our bill is what we saw as necessary to save the lives of the American people, the livelihoods of the American people, and the life of our democracy.
You can hear the confidence in her voice there. Essentially, the Democrats have looked at polling. They look at their constituency. They know that it's been a popular idea to give people extra money while they're stuck at home during this COVID pandemic, which, you know, let's face it, is still raging. The Republicans are showing that they are failing in the polls. The White House seeming to try and take action. The question is, where's the money coming from? How's it going to be spent? And is it legal? So all this to be worked out when we hear from the president.
Nathan, the other big development, the United States continuing its relentless attack against China. Those media apps that we talked about, TikTok, WeChat, they've been banned in the United States. They can't do business here. And then Hong Kong's chief executive, among some people, all caught in the crosshairs. What's the latest on that?
Yeah, there's so much to say. I mean, I wish I had 30 minutes, but essentially, is it an attack or a tantrum? You know, it's quite incredible. As we know from over the weekend, the US president decided he wanted to ban TikTok completely, which has 100 million users. My son is an avid fan of it. And then allowed Microsoft to negotiate some sort of a deal. He issued an executive order essentially saying you got 45 days to do it. TikTok have hit back really hard, saying this is just not right. They are threatening now court action. They say this they will pursue it in the US courts, accusing the White House of essentially interfering in private business. Now, WeChat is, even though it's not well known in this country, as you know, 700, 800 million users in China. We use it for everything. I use it every day. Now, this is very interesting. It's owned by Tencent, which, of course, is probably one of the biggest tech companies in the world. It has not just WeChat, WeChat Pay, but also huge investments in gaming. I mean, I can talk about Epic Games. I can talk about World of Warcraft, owns 10% of Universal Music, and there was this real freak out. Its share price went down 10% in Hong Kong because this whole idea of this executive order not being able to do transactions, and that's a key word to watch, does it apply to just WeChat or does it apply to Tencent? All this is going to be fleshed out by the Commerce Department apparently in the next few days. We still don't know. Tencent says it's basically reading essentially the executive order and waiting. But there is in no doubt, as we heard from Mike Pompeo on Wednesday about his so-called clean networks. This is an all-out assault from the Trump administration, its last days of its first administration, to throw everything at China in not just the human rights and political space, but also the tech space. There is a real fear that China's internet champions could threaten US global dominance. They've used the word national security a lot, yet they haven't provided really any evidence, especially when it comes to TikTok. You know, it's a dancing app. And WeChat, let's face it, it's not very popular here, unless you're a student here trying to talk to mum and dad.
Thanks, Nathan. That's CGTN's Nathan King joining us from the White House. Thank you. Well, let's continue the discussion now with our panel. Qinduo Xu joins us from Beijing. He's a political analyst and senior fellow at the Pangoal Institution. Morgan Muchnick is a Republican strategist and founder of the M2Group, a consulting firm. He joins us from Boston. With us here in Washington, Kimberly Leonard is senior healthcare reporter with Business Insider. And also here in Washington, Brian Becker is Executive Director of the Answer Coalition. Welcome to all of you to the show. And Qinduo Xu, let me start with you in Beijing. I mean, as we just heard, President Trump has signed that executive order, which effectively bans TikTok and WeChat from doing business in the United States. President Trump citing security concerns as the reason for that, but of course the Chinese have a very different view. This is what the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin had to say. Let's listen.
Mr. Pompeo and other U.S. politicians have repeatedly used national security as a pretext to abuse state power and suppress Chinese high-tech companies. China is firmly opposed to this. The relevant U.S. approach has no factual basis at all. It is clear malicious mirroring and political manipulation. The point of it all is to maintain its own monopoly over its high-tech industries. It completely goes against market principles and international trade rules, seriously threatens the security of global industry chains and supply chains. It is a typical hegemonic act.
So, Qinduo, how is this action by the president being seen in China, and what are the options that China has if it wants to respond?
Well, TikTok has been in the news for quite some time, so people are not that surprised about the possible ban of TikTok in the US or being purchased by Microsoft and other companies. But the latest news about WeChat is shocking to a lot of people because if you look at the executive order, it's not only about WeChat, it's about Tencent, the company, which also includes WeChat Pay, and other like a gaming under Tencent. That would be very inclusive. I would say that is unthinkable in a sense. Look, even U.S. companies here in China, McDonald's or KFC or other U.S. companies, they use WeChat Pay to do business with their Chinese consumers. Under the order, actually, they cannot do that. That's impossible for them to continue their business if they follow the ban. And also, if you look at iPhone, for example, in their Apple App Store, if you don't have WeChat here in China, if you want to sell iPhone, it's a big no-no. People will give up iPhone and simply switch to another phone which has WeChat available. So it's not that clear, what will happen to WeChat and Tencent, whether they will go ahead to launch a law, suit against the U.S. Executive order by Trump. And then the time will be, say, dragged on and on, rather than anything will be done in 45 days. So it's not that clear. But in general, people are saying, that's abuse of the concept of national security. It's more than that. WeChat is not widely used by the U.S. consumers, mostly by probably Chinese or someone who has Chinese business to do.
That's right. It's not used by many people here in the United States. Morgan Muchnick, President Trump cited security concerns when he signed this executive order. But if that is the case, why doesn't he, for instance, ban iPhones from being imported into the United States from China? They're manufactured there, they're brought here, or MacBooks or iMacs for that matter.
Well, I assume you're not advocating for that. I think you're probably trying to make a bigger point. Everyone in the public policy sector in the United States, everyone who's objective and rational about cybersecurity and data privacy, all know TikTok is a siphon for information. I don't use it. I let my daughter use it because she uses it for dancing, but no one I know who's an adult who has any type of job or life where there's even a semblance of importance of their data, none of them use TikTok. It's very well known how dangerous that application is. But that being said, we use it for other reasons, and fair enough. But I don't really know anybody of any real substance who has a big problem with taking it a little slower on the application of TikTok. Now, the WeChat and the data commerce related issues, I think, are far more complicated and are very much reasonable minds can disagree on that, because the international system of buying and selling products and information and the like is very complicated. And I think we're struggling with that. And I think you'll find the Commerce Department here in the United States will probably come to some more thoughtful end space. But I think TikTok is going to be pushed to the side here by American use for a while.
Morgan, it seems that President Trump has gone on the offensive against China, and it seems that it's got more intense as we approach the election. For instance, he's blamed China for the pandemic here in the United States, when we know that public opinion polls here in the United States tell us that it's his handling of the pandemic that is to blame. I mean, is there a strategy to this, or is he just lashing out in all directions?
So I think there's both. I mean, there's no question that there is some concern amongst Trump supporters and people that are inside his circle about some of the concerns with his reelectability. Some of the numbers, even though with Trump, it's very hard to really trust the poll numbers. And a lot of people think that the spread is outlandish. But there still is some real concern, though, amongst people about, even if it's not 10, 12, 13 points, but if Biden's even up by a little bit, that does make, I think, a lot of people who are supporters of the president a bit nervous, for sure. That's true. But it's not fair to say that Trump is lashing out at China in the sense that this is anything new. It might feel more aggressive and more focused today, but Trump's point of view about China has been there even before when he ran as a candidate. And he's by far the strongest, again, I'm not saying it's good or bad, but he is certainly seen as the strongest national figure in the United States in terms of pushing back against Chinese policy here or there. But it is fair to say that maybe he's being more aggressive with it now. But the fact that he calls it a China virus isn't the same as people maybe not liking his handling of the crisis. Those are, I think, two different things. I think you'll find most Americans are down on China in terms of China's role with the spreading of the virus internationally. In addition, I do think that the president is a bit underwater on the public opinion polls about how he's handling the minutia, the technical process of the American reaction to it.
All right, let me go to Brian Becker. Brian, getting back to the president's executive order on TikTok and WeChat, the United States Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has been talking about that. Let's listen to what he had to say.
We're protecting Americans' most sensitive personal information and our businesses' most valuable intellectual property, including COVID vaccine research, from being accessed on cloud-based systems run by companies such as Alibaba, Baidu, China Mobile, China Telecom, and Tencent. The State Department will work closely with Commerce and other agencies to limit the ability of Chinese cloud service providers to collect, to store, and to process vast amounts of data and sensitive information here in the United States.
Do you buy that, Brian? Is that a convincing argument that this is about security?
That's rubbish. That's complete rubbish. That's nonsense. Everyone who's paying attention knows that this has nothing to do with security or data collection or privacy. This is a form of economic gangsterism. The US government always says it believes in the free market. Let the consumer decide. Let the customers pick the product they like best. They pick the winners and losers. That's the beauty of the free market. Well, when Chinese companies like TikTok and others come in and beat their American competitors, the US government, the Trump administration, Mike Pompeo turn around and say, that wasn't about the free market at all. This wasn't about competition. These companies represent a grave threat to the American people, and so we have to ban them. And then we have to say to them, we're going to kick you out completely unless you sell your company to an American competitor like Microsoft, and you can have the sale where you can sell your company, which beat our company, for pennies on the dollar. I mean, this is economic gangsterism. So it's not simply about the full court new Cold War attack against China. It's partly that, but it's just a form of economic protectionism and a violation of international trade rules, and certainly using national security to violate the World Trade Organization rules, really because China's winning. Chinese companies are doing better than American companies in these high-tech areas. That's what the Trump administration's policies are really all about.
Qinduo Xu, I want to get to one other thing, and that is the United States announcement on sanctions against 11 Chinese officials, including the Hong Kong chief executive, Carrie Lam. What is China making of that?
Well, I think Hong Kong, from the Chinese side point of view, Hong Kong is simply a card used by the Washington to attack China, just like Xinjiang, Taiwan, Tibet, all the China-related issue here. Because we have seen over the past year also, you see the riot, the violent protests, the storming into the Legislative Council. Even the burning of an innocent bystander almost killed him. Behaviors like this, you have to stop this, the chaos in this city. So there's a national security law, and the U.S. has been trying to use it, to I would say to smear the image of China and to attack the Chinese officials. But of course, the publishing of this recent list of Chinese officials, including Carrie Lam, is expected and largely symbolic, I would say, because they don't have access in the U.S. If there's a visa issue, they would choose not to go to the U.S. That's not a big problem. Even that Chinese side probably will respond accordingly. So maybe that's it. I think for the U.S., the gain is really to put China in the negative light, to say, oh, you are somehow hurting the freedoms. But look, in the U.S., what happened? When there is this protest, this chaos, President Trump called for even the use of military forces to crack down. So now they say they care a lot about the freedom, the benefits of Hong Kong people. Nobody buys it. All
right, Qinduo Xu, this is where we say goodbye to you. Thank you so much for being with us. We'll continue the discussion now with the rest of our panel. And I want to bring in Kimberly. Kimberly, turning now to U.S. domestic issues, COVID-19 has now taken the lives of 160,000 Americans. There is no sign that officials are getting on top of this. And we now, 6 months into the outbreak, more than 6 months into the outbreak. President Trump continues to cite figures that have been debunked. In fact, his Facebook and Twitter accounts, not his campaign's Facebook and Twitter accounts have been suspended for spreading misinformation. What can you tell us about the situation right now?
Sure, right. And the videos were suspended because of claims that he made about children being immune to the virus. We know that they're not immune, that they do carry the virus, that there have been studies that shown that they might carry as much as adults even. And that means that they risk spreading it to adults. One of the big questions heading into this fall is, will schools be able to reopen? It's a fundamental piece of being able to reopen the economy so that parents aren't juggling both their jobs and teaching their children, or perhaps having to quit their jobs in order to supervise and do lesson plans and things like that. And it'll really depend on whether we're able to get a hold of this virus, and then whether the economy can rebound. And right now, as we discussed earlier in the program, Congress is not close to a deal on the next stimulus. We've known for months that this would be the most contentious of the coronavirus stimulus packages that we would see. And Congress has passed several deadlines. They're nearing another deadline this weekend, the Paycheck Protection Program, which allowed small businesses to take out loans in order to keep their employees on the payroll. That's expiring. And so all eyes are now on President Trump for this weekend to see whether he's going to extend certain benefits and whether he'll be able to.
Just one other point, Kimberly, and that is, we know that millions of Americans have lost their jobs because of the pandemic. There were 1.8 million Americans who filed for jobless claims, new claims, that is, just this past week. Now, analysts are saying that is less than what they had expected, and the White House, of course, is touting this as a sign that the economy is rebounding. In fact, the White House talks about a V-shaped recovery, that there'll be a dip, but we'll get back to where we were very quickly. But is there any good news in this at all?
Well, I can say that analysts tell us that they now think that talks about a coronavirus stimulus could be pushed back even further now, because Republicans are also looking at those numbers and saying, maybe there's not so much urgency to pass a stimulus right now. The thing is, I think we'll just start seeing more reports about people who perhaps are moving from furloughed jobs into, actual layoffs. We'll start seeing more reports of people who have been evicted from their homes, students who are unable to pay back their loans.
Right.
And so a lot of the pressure I think will really come from those, stories of people, of Americans who want to go back to work but can't because the situation just continues to be so dire.
Morgan, U.S. lawmakers, of course, are at a stalemate on this stimulus bill. President Trump has said that he will sign an executive order bringing benefits to those people who need those benefits. What are the main sticking points in Congress?
So in my mind, there is a lot of tension amongst some of the Republicans, and your previous woman, the guest that mentioned that, and I think she's right about this, is that the economy is actually seemingly so strong relative to the situation we find ourselves in, that some people say that, well, why do we need so much stimulus if the economy is actually doing so well? So there's a little bit of an awkward logical dance, but politically it's just brutal, right? I mean, how can you immediately precede a national election and, let's say, slow walk the aid that Americans need or expect, or both?
Yeah.
So I don't see any real way, even if the Republicans wanted to, which I'm not sure they do anyway, but even if they wanted to, I just don't think it's really feasible. And one quick note about the way America, I think, is managing the COVID response.
Yeah. One
of the problems I think the whole world has found ourselves in, certainly here in the United States, is that we're using models that just don't fit. The American government model we're using to tackle this problem is so out of whack. A new generation of data companies, I think, are needed to rethink the model on how we manage sensitive healthcare data, and we cross American states, because in China you have a different system, but in the United States we have 50 different countries all put together, and it's very hard to manage outbreaks in Maryland versus an outbreak in Texas versus one in the District of Columbia. And we're just doing this so poorly. And the way we're managing it is so hyper-political that it's hurting the process as well.
Yeah.
I really think, I work with young companies like Data Wallet and these really cool companies that are really rethinking the models of how we can protect data safety, but make it available because we're fumbling the ball left and right. And I hate watching the political leveraging points that both sides use on, well, we have 3 extra cases in this city, or 3 less in that city, and it's a Republican state that's suffering, or a Democratic state.
That's right.
It's tough. People like me, it's tough.
It has become very politicized. Brian, I want to get back to that stimulus bill in the U.S. Congress. What do you make of the partisan squabbling that's taking place? Millions of people out of work right now are not able to pay things like their rents, their mortgages. They're not able to pay food bills, for that matter.
This is a debacle in the U.S. Congress. I think Donald Trump, has a lot to be blamed for in terms of the failure to manage COVID-19, terrible job that he did in the White House, but Congress has failed too. I mean, here you have a situation where, according to the Aspen report, as many as 40 million Americans are going to be evicted from their homes by the end of the year. Starting in September, about 10 to 15 million are facing eviction. Many can't pay their mortgages, so they're going to lose their homes and they're going to lose their equity. We had, for the 20th week in a row, more than 1 million people file for unemployment benefits for 20 straight weeks. And here you have the elected representatives in Congress that tells the rest of the world and tells the American people it's the greatest exercise in democracy and the best form of governance. It's really exceptional. And they can't do anything. Yeah. They haven't been able to do anything. And I think the American people are red hot. The economy is not recovering. When you have 40 million people facing eviction, you can't really talk about an economic recovery with a straight face.
Yeah. Kimberly, you know, this pandemic has, of course, affected people in very different ways. The impact has been devastating across the board. There's an advocacy group called Families USA, which says that about 5.5 million Americans have lost their health insurance because of the pandemic. That's because they've lost their jobs as well. Where do they get health cover now with a pandemic raging around them?
Well, the Affordable Care Act, which was passed under President Barack Obama, really opened up more opportunities for people to get health insurance. One of them was through Medicaid expansion, and Medicaid is a program that people pay very little or no money for themselves, and you have to be low income in order to qualify. Not every state offers the provision, though, so some people are falling through the cracks if they're unable to sign up for that. The other way that people can sign up for healthcare coverage is through healthcare.gov and other online marketplaces that essentially allow people to receive private health insurance that is subsidized by the federal government. And so their premiums cost less than they would if they were just buying health insurance on their own. I think one big trend that we're seeing that isn't really being talked about that much is that the losses in health insurance are probably lower than a lot of people expected because employers are furloughing their workers instead of laying them off. And so that allows people to stay on to their jobs, or excuse me, to stay on to their benefits. The question is, though, how much longer are they going to be furloughed, and will those furloughs turn into layoffs, and what will that do to health insurance coverage?
Very quickly, Kimberly.
Just one quick point to that.
Yeah, go ahead. Very quickly.
One quick to the healthcare.
Yeah.
The telemedicine, telework, teleed are also changing this a lot.
Okay.
And that's driving down costs. And that will be one good positive, I think, looking ahead after we come out of it.
Okay, I have to go. We have run out of time. Thank you to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching.